Coming up in this episode...
Quite ridiculously incesty love triangle.
It's the perfect 90s movie.
The Untameable Brad Pitt.
Every scene is way over the top.
When I say honest, I'm going to be brutally honest.
Some of the most ridiculous 5 minutes of World War I ever filmed.
The facial contortions of Hopkins, I find... This is peak 90s, isn't it?
Welcome back to the Historical Movies Podcast. And in today's episode, Bryce... Oh, what's going on here? It's Legends of the Fall. I'm delighted, Bryce. My name is Ross, by the way. I'm an editor, and I'm joined as ever by my brother, Bryce, Professor of Modern History at Liverpool Hope University and historical scriptwriter. Bryce, you watched this movie at the weekend, I believe, and you then messaged me saying, we've got to do this on the podcast. You'll see why. And then I started watching it. I started watching this wonderful, very 90s movie. And I was getting through it and I was thinking, so what did he mean exactly? It's quite melodramatic, it's a bit over the top, you know. And then we have what can only be described as a world-class post-stroke performance by Sir Anthony Hopkins, which left me, this scene in more than one occasion left me laughing rather than, I think it's supposed to be crying. But I'm not taking the piss out of it like that because I really enjoyed watching this movie, all 2 hours and 20 minutes out of it. And for the time I watched this, I was really immersed in the Ludlow family life. But Bryce, this is a great, I think that's probably, is that the reason why you asked me, why you thought I would like it? That legendary performance?
Yeah, I'm glad that you went there with the stroke impression.
Yeah,
so
I
wasn't sure
whether
to do so or not. And if I do impressions of subsequently on this pod of Anthony Hopkins, that's only because I would like to kind of lampoon his performance. I would obviously not be laughing at stroke victims in general. I need to make that really clear.
We're laughing at someone doing a stroke victim. We're not laughing at stroke victims.
Really, really, really bad acting. From quite a stellar renowned actor, this sort of ridiculous, intensely government hating stroke victim. And the reason I want to watch it,
screw the government.
And then one scene where he sort of forgets he can speak and just writes happy on.
I'm happy.
I'm happy.
I'm happy.
Oh, it's just brilliant. All the funnier. But as you said, when I said we have to do this, number one, as you said, I think this is probably the most 90s movie ever made, and I hadn't seen it before. And number two, I think the Hopkins stroke acting, I don't know, is it intentionally funny? I couldn't stop laughing. And then number three, it was all the funnier because I watched it with someone who earnestly and honestly rates this as a good movie. And
I rate it as a good 90s movie. I think you summed it up perfectly by saying it's the perfect 90s movie. And I think that's the key to enjoying this because I'm a massive fan of 90s movies. There's something about, I think we've briefly talked about it on the podcast before. There's something about that period of history where America had quote unquote won the Cold War. It's before September the 11th.
Yeah.
They're absolutely king of the hill and they have such unbelievable confidence in Hollywood at that period in the 90s.
Well, should we give listeners a quick resume of the plot first before we jump in terms of like you say, the Ludlow dynasty?
Please.
Well, yeah, some people might not have seen it. It's just, I think obviously Anthony Hopkins, the stroke victim, is the patriarch of the family, and then it follows. We're out in beautiful Montana, and
filmed in Calgary, I think, though.
Oh right, well, was Montana? Was there a chocolate bar, a Montana chocolate bar at one stage? I think there was.
I think so, yeah.
But yep. I suppose at its heart, this movie follows the ridiculous. Again, I think. Quite ridiculously incesty love triangle, or should I call it a love quadrilateral? Because all three brothers are trying to climb on Julia Ormond.
Yeah.
And maybe the incest is appropriate, given when I looked up this, Ludlow, they're actually a Cornish family. And they go off to war, and then they come back, and then... where do we end up? We end up with a reconciliation of sorts.
Yeah, but of course it also encompasses a lot of the American history of that period. I think the last scene is in 1963.
Oh God, it packs it all in, doesn't it? We got World War I, we got Prohibition, we've got 60s, very briefly.
it's based on a novella by the same name by Jim Harrison, I believe.
Yeah, did you read about that?
No, what I have read about the book is that it appears to be even more over the top than the movie in some respects. For example, Tristan apparently cuts out the hearts of those he kills and mails them to Alfred.
So it's based on a Jim Harrison, now deceased American author, novella, financed by Jack Nicholson.
What? Wow, I didn't know this. Is amazing. So it's 1979 it was written.
Which took just 9 days to write.
Didn't know this.
And
it makes it all the better.
It shows, because I just think this is such a ridiculously overblown melodramatic nonsense, but as you said, very watchable.
Yeah. Well, it struck me, this is such a perfectly 90s movie. It's scored again by our friend James Horner, who we've come back to. He did Braveheart, Titanic. He's done so many of the films of this period.
Little James Horner,
and the music
set in the corner. Yes.
Writing film scores for 90s film scores. Songs. But it is. So one critic said, I read, that it is the performances, because there are some great performances in this movie. Yeah, there are. I think like Aidan, what's his name? Alfred.
Milky blue eyes. The milky blue eyes of Aidan Quinn. He's
Aidan Quinn.
He's a great eye actor. His milky blue eyes, not Mickey blue eyes. That would be another 90s movie reference, but milky blue eyes.
There is a great scene, I think, when he's having the showdown with Hopkins. Or one of the showdowns. There's a few showdowns on the ranch.
I think Aidan Quinn is the best actor in this, actually.
Yeah, I think he gives a brilliant performance. This is gone down as Brad Pitt's breakout performance, but I think Aidan Quinn, who's kind of been forgotten, we did him in he's in Michael Collins playing almost exactly the same character, it would appear, period piece, as this. But he seems sort of forgotten in these kind of 90s movies.
The Untameable Brad Pitt gets all the accolades here. He's so wild. He's so, do you know, and you say it's very 90s. Can I just address that? As you said, with that upbeat, almost seductively upbeat 90s American movies. And one of their sort of themes always running through them is that they're very anti-racist. And so anti-racist is Brad Pitt's character in this that he beats a barman almost to death for not serving a beer to his Native American mate, which is just one of his uncontrollable fits of temper, because Brad Pitt is on, like the Wilds, he is untameable. Yeah, but
yes. But did you know, apparently him and the director, Edward Zwick, didn't get on. Brad Pitt was difficult to work with, according to Zwick's book, because
Who's Zwick's book?
Edward Zwick, the director. He wrote a book.
Zwick's memoir, you mean?
Yes, his memoir. Right. And he said that Pitt was very difficult to work with, based around the fact that Pitt believed his character wasn't wild enough.
Oh, Brad Pitt believes his character wasn't wild enough. Yeah. Brad Pitt's character is such a noble savage. Not only does he beat almost to death nearly everyone he comes across in the movie, as well as riding both of his brother's love interest. He's not even wild enough there, including scalping German soldiers. That's not wild enough?
Extracting his own brother's heart. No, it isn't, apparently, according to Pitt. Time for a very short interruption. It's Ross here. Thanks very much for listening on YouTube. Don't forget to check out all of our other episodes, and we'd love to hear from you, so leave us a comment. And any sharing or liking or subscribing you can do would really help the podcast. So thanks a lot. I wanted to come back, though. I was making a point about the James Horner score. Someone said that this is overly scored. The performances suffer from over-editing. And I read that and I thought, well, that was written at the time, I think, when this movie came out. And I thought, yeah, well, maybe, we've talked in this movie, we had a period, Bryce, I think you had severe fatigue from sword and sandal films when we did a few, from like the 60s, those really long films. And I made the point later that, that was like the big event in the 60s. You go to the cinema, you want to pay your money and be entertained. You want to see something that's 3 or 4 hours long. Right. Well, in the 90s, this is meant to be seen in a cinema. And I, like you, I imagine watched it at home on the small screen. But if you go to the cinema and watch this and it is scored to the bejeez, every scene has got music underneath it. Every scene is way over the top. And I really like that style of cinema. It is like the uber confidence of American Hollywood in the 90s.
It's very broadly of the cowboy tradition, isn't it? And it's very, it's a horsey, mountainy movie. So but it has to have a big score to keep up with the epicness of the landscape.
Yeah, beautiful shots of the landscape. Won an Oscar for cinematography. I originally thought when I was watching this, I thought Hopkins's world accent tour, where he's supposed to be Cornish American, isn't he? But he goes Northern Irish, then it's West Country for a bit.
Yeah.
Scottish, English, bit of Welsh in there as well.
Can I just say...
It's all over the place, his accent in this movie. Not for the first time from Anthony.
I'll be honest here, and when I say honest, I'm going to be brutally honest. I've never really gotten the Anthony Hopkins hype. And when I watched this movie, I'm afraid it kind of affirmed to me the fact that he's not as good an actor as many people, including himself, think he is. I'm trying to take. He's a big name, but the accent tour, the ridiculousness of the character, maybe not his fault, but are we going to probably dwell a little bit more on the post-stroke acting? Because it's just, it's just so silly.
It's a wonder. I don't know. I mean, do you know what? I usually ask you the question: what part would Mel Gibson or Daniel Day-Lewis or Marlon Brando play? And I was just thinking when I was watching this, what difference it would have been if Daniel Day-Lewis, who obviously would be too young, if he would have played that part.
As an older man, I think he would have played it a lot better. But I think a young Mel Gibson would obviously be in the Brad Pitt role, wouldn't he?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But you see, Anthony Hopkins he's the extent of his government hating is again, it of course it's justified in that excessively American way of the frontier spirit and manifest destiny, and nobody's going to tell me what to do. The notion of liberty, which is in some ways very beautiful, in other ways at its most libertarian extremes is very silly, and fair enough, like I say, with the anti-racist remit of all overblown 90s movie. He hates the government, does Hopkins' character, the patriarch, Colonel Ludlow, because they've been beastly to the Native Americans, which we all know is an historical fact. So it's believable in that sense. But I think I'm going to point the finger at Hopkins here. He takes this sort of nobody going to tell me what to do kind of attitude to his hatred for the federal government seems to it seems that this is a particular kind of stroke which epidemiologically increases one's hatred for the federal government.
Well, in his defense, I mean, he is basically playing that kind of centered, calm, reassuring patriarchal figure, which he does before the stroke, does pretty well, I would say. And in that scene that you mentioned when they're in the bar and he's trying to buy one stab of beer, but Anthony Hopkins there I like that scene because he says he pushes Brad Pitt against the wall and says you're an idiot, and then he basically tells the barman exactly what he's doing. So it's that kind of, I've seen it all before, I'm calm and centered. I think he does that well the first half. Then the stroke happens, unknown to science previously. Then he starts pathological hatred of the federal government.
Well, he's always had that. He's always had that, but it's the...
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm going to... And, again, that plays to that very American frontiersman sense. But I would blame Hopkins for the sort of mumbling incoherence of his hatred for... It's sort of so weird. It's so weird in places.
But it's not really explained in the movie, is it? Because this movie goes into, I think, a lot more of the background of the characters than the book does, apparently. I haven't read the book, but that's what I've read. But it doesn't really fully explain that. It mentions, he doesn't like the way that the Native Americans are treated. We all know historically what that could be, but it doesn't really pick that apart. That's why. But that's my point. That's why when he's going on about screw them, screw the government, it's kind of it's laughable because you think, okay, but this hasn't really been explained to the viewer.
Maybe to let Hopkins off the hook there. Yeah, what are his character motivations here? And we've all been at the stage when we've been, nicked for speeding or, filling in our tax returns where we're like, sod the government. But I just feel that it's just not I don't know.
Pathological hatred.
Well, it's again, like, I can only explain it. It's a particular type of stroke. Again, this is unexplained. Why does he write in? So maybe some people could write in and tell me here. What he can speak in some scenes, but he can't speak. Is that?
Well, hang on a second. He speaks in the later scenes, so maybe he had the stroke, and then later he regained some of his ability to talk.
Okay, all right.
I'm happy.
I liked him with the chalkboard when he was happier, and he was in a happier place. He was in a happier place.
Yeah, that's true.
The facial contortions of Hopkins, I find really, really hammy. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a difficult brief or something. But yeah,
you have to look at the director.
He can't have been drunk
as
because
well.
he doesn't drink. Anthony Hopkins. Oh, that was why I watched it. I thought, is he drunk? But doing these, but he doesn't drink. So anyway.
You mentioned one theme there, Bryce, which was romancing the frontier, which we've mentioned before on this podcast. But so much so in this movie that Hopkins' wife buggers off because she's like, I've had enough of this. And that's also not kind of
explored. It's not really explored. Again,
fully,
it's very sort of incongruous with the period. That didn't really happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But yes, she's gone. She leaves them, and he's out there, and he's such a man of the people. He even at one stage has his dinner with the Native American servants. It's
oh yes,
he's a
like
man of the people. Yeah,
I had to look up one part of the history here. Well, two parts that fascinated me, and it's all around World War One, because I think basically this movie, Legends of the Fall from Innocence, that kind of thing, and it all revolves around the fact that the three brothers sign up to go to World War One, and I thought. Is that common? Because America didn't enter World War One until April 1917. And it was quite difficult for me to find this, but about 35,000 Americans enlisted in the Canadian Expeditionary Force before April 1917. Because when I was watching this movie, Samuel, who's the more kind of, what would you say, well-mannered brother who likes to... Isn't he like doing... He's singing, isn't he, at one point?
Where does he get her from?
I don't know.
His English.
Because basically, there's that scene where he's talking to Brad Pitt and saying that she's. How does he put it? She's a bit kind of passionate, which means she wants to shag before the wedding. Now he then decides, I'm going to war. I'm going to leave my passionate wife for a pointless war.
Well, look,
and I'm thinking, why?
The passions of, I suppose, notions of masculinity at that time. The passions, the proving oneself, manliness. As you said there, yeah, it is weird because they cross the border to join up. But as you said there, and of course the father is supposed to be English or Cornish, British, isn't he? So maybe it's sort of martial, manly aspiration plus filial obligation somehow. Okay,
I would have thought that kind of thing would come from the father figure. We're in a patriarchy, and the father figure in this movie is saying, "Don't go to war because I hate the government." There's no oh, don't kill innocent people or whatever, or war is inherently evil. It's just don't do it because the government are telling you to do it. Brilliant. But I would have thought that if this period, if your father is saying the father figure, the patriarchal figure on the family ranch where you're living is saying you shouldn't go to join the war, then you wouldn't. But there we go. And all three of them go off.
I do wonder, and I haven't read the original source material, the original book. Is Hopkins's character motivated by other things? I'm afraid I haven't read the original source material because this, I think this film is actually in some ways, it's very 90s movie, very upbeat, sort of America, but at the same time, it's pandering to the very worst excesses of that sort of, don't trust the government, or don't trust any politicians kind of thing. This sort of Henry David Thoreau, just out in the wild, and this is virgin territory, and I do what I want, which is great idea, but actually this is set, in the 20th century, and it's impossible to live that kind of life. I suppose maybe that's one of the themes here. It's the changing eras involved here, the growth of the federal government in its corruption as well. Can we come on to Prohibition, which I think... or should we stay with World War One?
Well, I just wanted to mention there's one other thing that piqued my interest watching this, and that is when the First World War scenes where the guy kicks the football and they all go over the top after the football, and I thought, I thought that must be true if they because that's too crazy to put it in otherwise, and it is true.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that later. But Prohibition is also mentioned in this.
But the First World War scenes, again, I think are like horrendously overblown. Like the death of the younger brother,
I'll spend many moments. I'll be picking that particular scene to death later when we go into our favourite scenes.
Right.
I think honestly, this, in the post, I say Saving Private Ryan. I know it's completely different conflict, but in that action film, it is some of the most ridiculous 5 minutes of World War I ever filmed. I mean, when he runs off. And there's like, where's the army? And then he gets gassed and he's blind and he gets stuck in the barbed wire. And there's just 2 Germans there. There's not like a whole line or
fumbling
anything.
Fumbling with their machine gun.
Yeah, I'll do it justice later. But I'm thinking this surely the pedants have had a field day with the tactics in World War I and this.
It's almost as if they're trying to lever in every possible aspect of the World War I experience.
In 5 minutes or however long it is. A bit longer than that, maybe 20 minutes or so.
And he's caught on the... Oh, you're going to get onto that. It's a ridiculous scene. It's in a ridiculous movie, it's a ridiculous scene.
It is. It's also one of my favourites. You wanted to mention Prohibition, Bryce. What did you want to say?
Well, I have a bit of a... I think, again, I find it a very... I find this film very heavy-handed and clumsy in the way it's trying to lever in historical periods in a very kind of knowing way. And then I think a very clumsy nod to the Kennedys, because, of course, JFK's father was, known to be a bootlegger. That's how he made a lot of his money. And sort of in this, I think it's very weird for being set up in Montana. I believe nearly every single one of the corrupt lawmen are Irish.
I think the bootleggers are also called like the O'Bannons.
The O'Bannon, yeah, it's almost, again, I think it's like so heavy-handed, clumsy sort of nod to Kennedy Sr.'s role in Prohibition. It just seems very weird to me.
So what do you mean? So I didn't know that. So JFK's dad was a bootlegger, and that's how he got involved. I know he got involved in the mafia and so on and stuff like that. Did he?
Well, I mean...
Or that came later?
The mafia, per se, but did Kennedy Sr. had made a lot of money through bootlegging, as did a lot of many other people, including the mafia. So I find it really odd that we're up in Montana, and yet every single bootlegger / corrupt lawman, again, the amount of Irish who were obviously in the police force as well, in America historically, and fire service.
Sorry, that would be much more likely if it was, for example, in Boston.
I just think it's very clumsy nod to what is it trying to flag there, that Kennedy Sr. was involved in Prohibition, that a lot of lawmen, certainly more on the East Coast, would have been Irish. It just seems a bit strange to me that we're up in Montana and all the baddies are Irish.
I did. The only thing that struck me was when right at the end of the movie, when there's a very brief scene, and I think it says that it's 1963, and I thought, oh God, is Brad Pitt going to shoot Kennedy and then cop it? Because I knew he was going to die. So it would have been perfect timing.
The furthest hatred of the government was such that I don't know, has Colonel Ludlow been eliminated as a suspect in the JFK
was he on the fifth
files?
Floor of the Texas book depository?
Such was his hatred of the federal government. Yeah.
Okay, so so there's also this kind of, we've talked about the themes, the historical stuff, I suppose the American identity, and then you've got this like fate, death, and they keep going on about the good death. At the end, one stab says it was a good death. When he gets mauled by the bear.
Well, again, this is very 90s, isn't it? This kind of you did a stroke victim for this. I'm gonna try not to offend you, but this kind of, and I'm only trying to offend. I'm not trying to offend. I'm trying to encapsulate what I feel is the very clumsy and, in some ways, sort of cultural appropriation of sort of Native American traditions in this type of 90s movie, where it's got all this kind of like singing off a rock, and is he sort of blind and wrinkled at the end when he's by the campfire, and it's so very I'd say idiotic in parts.
I haven't read any Native American criticism of this film, but I mean we've done a few movies. We've done Apocalypto. I know it's a different part of the Americas.
Last of the Mohicans.
Last of the Mohicans, of course. So we've come onto this subject, and movies of this era.
It's the Noble Savage again. We're back to the Noble Savage here,
exactly.
aren't we?
But they tend to take a simplistic or a sort of very liberal white mindset towards this and use the plight of the Native American to add dramatic...
All very well and good,
drama to the piece.
And that's a motivating force for Colonel Ludlow and his hatred of the government, of course. But none of these characters are anything more than one-dimensional stereotypes, are they? None of these Native American props. Can I call them that?
It's a good point. Shall we get on to our questions then, Bryce?
Yep.
So, actually, interestingly, alternative film name. Interestingly, this movie, clearly Legends of the Fall, it's called. It's a bit of a weird title, isn't it? But it's supposed to be the fall from innocence, I presume. I think basically this movie revolves around the World War I and the lasting impact the war has, you could say, maybe on generations of families. Is it? I
don't know. Is it just the fall as in the autumnal?
Well, that's the question, because as far as I read, it is basically the fall, as in the fall from innocence or from grace or whatever. But in the Swedish, South Korean, French, and Romanian versions of this movie, it's translated as fall as in autumn. So I don't know. It's a bit weird.
I'd certainly take it.
In other versions, it's translated as fall from innocence.
I certainly, in a nature-laden piece, I certainly took it as autumnal wistfulness.
What does that mean then? Legends of, it's the autumn of history or autumn of the family,
the
or
seasons, the growing of these men into manhood, and then their triumphs and then ultimate inevitable decline, much like the passing of the seasons, and
then winter would be the death or whatever. Yeah, okay, that works. Alternative cast. This was originally planned for Sean Connery and Tom Cruise. Can you imagine? Can you imagine Sir Sean coming out with a hairpiece on, limping out with his face in contortions, saying, "What's going on?" But he'd be like, "What's going on here?"
Well, again, he couldn't do any other accent, could he, Connery? And Hopkins tries to do it. Does he? Well, I think he does attempt a Cornish kind of doesn't he?
I think he is attempting. He actually does. He does actually 10 other accents in this movie whilst attempting Cornish, I think. And also, the role of Tristan was also offered to Johnny Depp as well. So, who was your favourite character or performance? Is it Anthony Hopkins just for his post-stroke performance?
I'm going to give it to the grizzly bear, who we first come across, of course, when Brad Pitt as a young boy, as a feral youth, declaws a grizzly bear. Is it the same grizzly bear who he later has a chance to shoot?
I think it's supposed to be,
but out of honor and respect and his own untameable wildness yet noble savagery, doesn't shoot him. And then is it the same grizzly bear who kills him in 1963? Surely not.
Well, I thought that's what you were asking me, whether it was the same grizzly in 1963.
Sure, hang on, Google lifespan of grizzly bears.
I think they live. I'm going to say that they live long enough.
Lifespan grizzly. Hang on, listeners. Lifespan grizzly bears.
And
20 to 25 years. So this grizzly would have to be like 80 when he finally gets his own back.
Finally gets his own back on the little shit Tristan.
I think it's the best piece of grizzly bear acting I've seen, and include Cocaine Bear in that.
So we've got to mention then Brad Pitt, who we said was difficult to work with apparently during the making of this movie, but this is in many ways seen as his breakout performance after Interview with the Vampire, isn't it? I also enjoyed the fact that, which I think you'll also like in this movie, Bryce, the fact that every time we see him, we get like this panpipe music cue, a bit akin to Mel Gibson in
Lethal Weapon,
Lethal Weapon, and or Danny Glover with the saxophone.
Again, it's 90. This is peak 90s, isn't it?
And let me just remind listeners that Brad Pitt wanted his character to be even more crazy. This is a man who, in this movie, when he's where is he? In New Guinea, he sees someone holding a zebra's heart heart, which gives them a flashback to him extracting his own brother's heart. And then the next scene we have is all these natives holding him down while he's literally writhing in like extreme crazy agony.
He does have
he wanted it crazier.
He had quite the gap here, didn't he? That character when he I mean, good grief, how could you get? I mean, like he even appalls his fellow British soldiers with his scalping antics, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think we mentioned... So anyway, my favourite character has to be Anthony Hopkins in this, but I think the best acting performance is Aidan Quinn, as we mentioned, who I think in parts gives a great performance in this movie. Julia Ormond, who plays Susanna, again, great. I don't really know her from many other things, but she does well at the kind of posh Brit in this movie.
Yeah, I'd also think an honourable mention to... Well, you said it's not even Montana, but the natural beauty of... where is it? You said it was filmed?
Canada. I think it's Calgary. It was filmed, if I'm not mistaken.
I think the landscape deserves a good actor mention as well.
Yeah. So we have to come to our favourite scenes, Bryce.
Yeah,
what was your favourite scene?
Go on, I'd like to hear.
Well,
yours.
I've got a few to go through, and I'll come to my favourite. But I think the scene where Samuel dies is, I mean, it is just. I honestly couldn't stop laughing. I mean, I know that may sound terrible to lovers of this movie, but I do mean that in a good way.
He's blinded. He's panicked. He's been ripped to shreds by
Well,
barbed
he gets
wire.
gassed. He's blind, and he hears his brother's voice, and so he, starts running towards it. Gets stuck on barbed wire, and then only two Germans. I don't know where the rest of the entire German, I don't know how big the army was. 5 million men are, but only two come up.
Clumsily fumbling amid the machine gun, yeah.
But they start setting up a machine gun. Just so we have enough time for Brad Pitt to run over and go, Samuel, no! And then they're slowly taking out this machine gun, setting it up all clunky, and then there's that image of him with his hands up, kind of stuck on the barbed wire,
riddled with bullets.
Then he gets riddled with bullets.
Riddled.
And then, of course, Brad Pitt, kills the two Germans who are very slowly setting up a machine. I don't know why one of them doesn't just have a rifle, and just takes aim and shoots at him. Isn't that much more sensible than setting up a machine gun?
Well, hang on, this is your favourite scene. So
No, it's not my favourite scene. I'll come on to the favourite scene later. Okay. Anyway, so then Brad Pitt removes his heart. No, sorry. Then Brad Pitt goes to his body, and then he says, and I quote, "Oh God damn you, God! Oh God damn God!" I wrote it down because I thought that is brilliant. Then he removes his heart, and then he goes...
The Ludlow lads, they hate the government and they hate God, and they hate all the big ones. Yeah, sorry,
then
go on.
Then he has to remove, he has to get the knife and then stab him to remove his heart, which I didn't understand. Is that explained earlier in the film that he does that? I know it's supposed to be this a Native American thing and scalping them and so on, but particularly removing the heart, and then he paints the blood, doesn't he, under his eyes, and then he goes full Rambo. And he comes back with scalps. Yeah. And then he comes back with a load of scalps on the string. Yeah. But the problem is, and this might sound crazy, but I found the image of Samuel stuck on the barbed wire whilst two Germans are fumbling around with a machine gun so funny that every time in this movie, because it's so unbelievably melodramatic is my point, it's so over the top, it's so overblown. Every time in this movie when they're talking about, they talk about the pain of losing Samuel, or it's a shame that Samuel isn't here, I just see him stuck in this barbed wire with the two guys trying to set up the machine gun. It just made me laugh every time. So, anyway, that was one of my favourite scenes. I've talked about the 4 beers scene, which I actually really liked. Brad Pitt accidentally killing a calf with the barbed wire, and he's going, and I quote, "God damn it, God damn it." In that scene.
Well, that he did the girlfriend is with him there, isn't she? She's
then she sort of realises how wild and crazy this guy is. I think that's the point of the scene, isn't it? I think this movie is completely melodramatically overblown, and then we get the scene where he's held up at the end by the Irish. When they're driving along, with casks of whiskey, and they get held up in this sort of valley.
And shoot his new wife.
Yeah, but the way that's done is actually really effective because there's no overscoring, there's no over-dramatization. It's just basically revealed through a scream. We see Brad Pitt's face, then we hear a scream, and then we cut to a shot of his wife who's just completely still. And then we find out that she's died. And I actually watched that scene, and that was really effective, particularly because the whole rest of this movie is shoving the information into your face with a musical score. That I actually enjoyed the fact that as someone watching this, I had to do some work. I had to work out, okay, she's died.
So your favourite scene is when the beautiful score cops it?
No. I'm just saying that's one of my favourite scenes. I'm coming on to next.
Oh, good grief. This is a big build-up here.
Well, I always go through all of the scenes in this piece. So my favourite scene has to be the end scene.
Okay.
The end shootout where Hopkins comes out and says, "Let's go!" and then we get this amazing 90s slow-mo, which basically means there aren't enough frames per second for it to be unnoticeable. It's like it's kind of staggering around, and then he pulls out with his contorted face, looks at the shotgun, and then he shoots one of them, and then he very slowly shoots the other one, and I've really thought about this. Then, of course, his son, Alfred, comes out and comes good by killing the sheriff. And then there's this scene where they're hugging. And I'm thinking, it's because he hates the government. He's so happy that Alfred, who's played by the rules the whole time, one son plays by the rules, one doesn't. And he's so glad that his son has finally taken his revenge on the government that he's now yes.
Alfred's trajectory is in some ways building a political career. Okay, it's just a little bit corrupt and stuff, but it's quite an impressive ascent. That must have taken a lot of hard work. And then he sort of, in some ways, inexplicably undoes this by shooting a man.
And, sheriff, well, not just anyone, the sheriff.
And then very quickly saying to Brad Pitt, "See you later."
Yeah. I also have to mention, I really love the very end scene in this where we get a still frame of the bear attack as it's mauling Brad Pitt. And I was expecting to hear the voiceover, Billy the Bear received 9-year sentence in the State Penitentiary. Like that we did on Mississippi Burning.
Yeah.
So those were my favourite scenes. Sorry, what was your favourite scene?
Oh, I think you've covered panoply of them there. So yeah.
I've done most of the scenes in the film. There's some favourite shots. I think there's some wonderful shots in this. I liked very much about an hour and 20 minutes in. Then there's a voiceover where he says, "Then for years there was nothing," and we just get all these still life images of the ranch. It's really nicely done. So we've answered, Bryce. Actually, what part should Mel Gibson, Daniel Day-Lewis, or Marlon Brando have played?
Yeah.
DVD commentary. Who's doing that? Can we have 2.5 hours of post-stroke Sir Anthony?
Yeah, that.
I haven't got anything actually for best companion film. I've actually forgotten to do that.
I thought very similar again. In keeping with the sort of Untameable 90s, a film which I haven't watched for years. I think it's Kevin Costner, Dances with Wolves, which again is a similar,
that's a good one,
slightly earlier period, isn't it? And a man who's sort of gone native, and
we have to get around to doing that.
That's of similar spirit. So I'm not quite sure did it come out before or after this movie. But it's a very sort of mid-90s in a similar spirit to this movie, isn't it?
Yeah. What are you putting in the Hall of Fame? Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
So I've got two. One is the prosthetic animal limbs that we see close-ups of, which are quite obviously prosthetic. But one is the bear paw, and the other one is the calf hoof.
I would.
What did you have?
I was going to put in the bear claw. Yeah.
Well, one thing I would put in is the World War I football. So I've looked up whether this actually happened, and it did apparently during the Battle of Lewes in 1915 by the London Irish Rifles. Apparently, the story goes that there were, I think, 6. So the London Irish Rifles decided to, I don't know, extend the morale or give people something to do whilst they're running towards machine guns blindly. Yeah. They would kick footballs towards the enemy line to, I don't know, take their mind off the hell or something. I don't know. Yeah. Apparently there were 6 balls, and then the commanding officer found out about this and shot 5 of the balls. And one was hidden by a guy called Sergeant Frank Edwards, who hid it up his jumper. and then they go over the top and it gets stuck in barbed wire. Anyway, that football was sold about 10 years ago on the Antiques Roadshow for £15,000. The very football that was used. Antiques Roadshow listeners, not in the UK, that's where people take on antiques on television, get them valued, and then can sell them. So that actually did happen, and I was delighted to find out that that happened.
Also, we should mention that several of the London Irish rifles were, in fact, unfortunately, found after a VAR goal review check to be, in fact, in an offside position when the ball was kicked.
When they were machine gunned down. Yeah. But how stingy of the commanding officer. These guys, they want to take a football over the top. Let them take a football over the top whilst they're running towards a machine gun.
It does make one wonder how the Untameable Brad Pitt ever fared within the rigid class imperial confines of the British Army of that time.
But that's a very good point.
How did
Canadian
they
Army.
Control him? The Canadian Army. But even so, I mean, how did they...
Part of the British Empire, wasn't it?
How did they control this untamable savage? Yes.
What would happen in the sequel if there was one? I don't think we need a sequel, do we? I think this film basically covers a vast, quite a long period of the American experience, maybe you would say. And it's got like a World War I prohibition.
Choo-choo trains.
The Kennedy assassination.
Horses.
Featuring a bear. Yeah. So I think
a good 80 years. Yeah.
What have you got for Sood's Corner, Bryce?
Well, I'm going to upset you here, Ross, because I know you're a big fan of Roger Ebert. But when I read that he liked this movie, when I read that he liked the movie, I immediately lost all respect for him. Hang on.
Roger's not always 100% accurate.
He says that it's full of it has quite full-blooded performances and heartfelt melodrama. Ebert's, come on, man. I mean, I really.
He watched this in a cinema though. That's where you're supposed to watch this movie.
Okay, well, I see your point there, and I'll raise you. Rita Kempley of the Washington Post, who also saw it in a cinema and stated, in my belief, quite correctly, quote, "The film's yarn doesn't so much sweep as sprawl across the screen in all its panoramic idiocy." End quote.
Oh.
Yes, agree. Yes, agree.
Okay. Well, for Pedant's Corner, I'm actually surprised there's less stuff. This movie doesn't have so much trivia. You might have noticed I didn't give any trivia this week. There's not so much of it going around. There's not so much kind of interest in this movie. I think it's sort of a bit forgotten. But anyway, I would have thought that a certain demographic of society would have found many problems with the depiction of World War I in this movie, but I've only really found one or two. So, factual error. During the battle scene, the voiceover says that it's February 1915. The battle being portrayed is obviously the Second Battle of Ypres, because it involves Canadian troops, and it's the first time that gas was used in the war. The actual battle didn't take place until the end of April 1915.
Well, there you are. Yeah.
So,
can't argue with that.
Got that out of the way.
Yep.
Bryce, so how are you summarising this film? What's your final verdict? What is your coveted marks out of 10?
My final verdict, very watchable, only because it's probably the most 90s of 90s movies ever. A silly movie in which Anthony Hopkins, Colonel Ludlow, is the most laughable of a range of laughable characters. Overall, overblown, utterly melodramatic rubbish, masked by the deep purples of the Montana skyline and the natural beauty of the landscape. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10.
Whoa, that's low. But you enjoyed it.
I think I only enjoyed it because I was watching it with someone who honestly, as I said, earnestly regards it as one of, if not the best movies ever made.
Okay. Was it Roger Ebert's Ghost?
No.
Yeah. I gave it a 7.
It's watchable. It's watchable.
Because of its watchability.
Yeah.
But as we know on this podcast, you're like the Limbo, not afraid to go low.
I also go high.
I tend to rate things.
I can go high.
I have never been to 10. You have been to 10. I've given it 7 because I enjoyed it. I think again, as we've mentioned before on this podcast, one of the reasons why we love these kind of movies is because I think I enjoyed it for many reasons. Many of which were not the intended reasons of the filmmakers, and that's no issue to me. So as a great 90s romp, through American history. I very much enjoyed it. So I've given it a 7 out of 10.
Grant. Yeah, fine with that.
Good. Okay. So, Bryce, thanks very much for joining me. Thanks for listening to the Historical Movies podcast. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to leave us a comment, or don't forget to email us or get in touch with us. And if you can like the video or do a subscribe, that would help us massively. So thank you very much for listening. We'll see you in the next episode of the Historical Movies podcast. That's it for this episode of the Historical Movies podcast. Don't forget to leave us a review on your chosen podcast platform. Spotify and Apple Podcasts make a huge difference to the algorithm. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to leave a comment or a like or subscribe. Thanks very much for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.